Hello, dear students. I hope you're doing well. My name is Shuja, and I am teaching in SCANS, Islamabad. I welcome you all on behalf of ACCA and SCANS School of Accountancy, Islamabad. Basically, we will be conducting the 5-day webinar that is being organized by ACCA for ATX students. The session will be focusing on key text areas understanding and explanations of areas that are key to succeed in the examination. You have these handouts given to you, mainly one Word document that is having some instructions and some key points that I have extracted from the ACCA website, examiner interview, and the guidelines from the examining team. Plus, you have a past paper of some previous attempt that was most probably March, June 2021 attempt that we will be discussing in today's session. I would like you to write the questions so that if there is any specific query, I can answer it. And you're more than welcome to give your input for the topics that you require more attention in the coming days, because we have this 5-day session and I have planned it in such a way that if you have some particular areas queries, I can be working on the questions relating to those areas, and we will be conducting the sessions for those areas in the later sessions. So you are very much welcome to write the questions and ask. Okay, so I would request you to please open the handout. Once you open the handout, you will see that I have tried to explain certain areas that are very critical to the success of this exam. On the top, I have written think more, write less. The basic idea behind this is that we start rushing into the question without understanding what was being asked and what we are supposed to write. You are all going to attempt this exam after clearing 10 to 11 papers of your ACCA. It means that you have enough knowledge and enough application in your mind, and after qualifying those examinations, you are at this level. We need to understand that once we are sitting in ATX, we have merged to a level that is far more superior than TX. If you remember your TX examination, the exam used to ask you, you are a tax junior or you are a tax trainee, and you have been instructed or requested to perform the calculations in this scenario, etc. But when you come to ATX examination, there is a change of approach. In TX, we were concerned with the numerical figures, but in ATX, we are mainly focused on the explanation of the areas that are being under question. So the mental level and the methodical approach for the examination is to be a little more higher than we used to perform in TX examination. If we refer to the handout given to you, the aim of ATX examination as per the examiner is that the candidates can provide individuals and businesses with the information and advice that they require regarding the impact that major UK taxes may have on their financial decisions and situations. We need to understand that once we are in a scenario, the concerned parties, either they are the individuals or the businesses, they expect a very expert kind of advice from us, so that they can base all their financial decisions on our recommendations. This is to be achieved through practical application of tax rules to any given scenario. See, if we are unable to understand the scenario at top priority and we fail to understand what was being asked or required by our individual or business, we will not be in a position to provide an answer that can actually help the cause. So the basic thing is, all the questions and all the answers here are directed towards the guiding to our individual and businesses for the advice that is going to impact the financial decisions. So we have to be very much careful, we have to be very much cautious to understand the current scenario, the given scenario, and to provide only those informations and inputs or expert tax advices that is very much relevant at that point. If there is any question till now, you are more than welcome to write it in the question box. Another thing we need to understand here is, there are many students who have uh, ample knowledge of tax, but they still fail. The main reason behind that is they fail to communicate what they actually wanted to communicate. So we need to be very much clear what we are going to write and how it is going to address the specific question at hand. I've written ability to communicate with clients, HMRC, and other professionals is the key. If we are not able to communicate, if we are not able to resolve the issues, even if we provide a good tax advice for that given scenario, but it is not being communicated properly and it could be misinterpreted or misunderstood, the whole or the sole purpose of this advice will not at all be helpful. So we need to be very much clear on how and what to communicate to the clients if they are in question, or HMRC if HMRC is asking you something in the question, and if some other firm or tax consultant is asking for your input on a certain scenario. I hope there is no uh, question till now. If there is any, you're more than welcome to put it in the question tab. Now, the next heading is stepping up from TX to ATX. When we skim through the examiner comments in the kit and in the past exam papers, the observation of the examiner and the examining team is that the students fail to display ample knowledge of TX. TX is the basic version of ATX, or we could say that advanced taxation is based on the syllabus we have studied in TX examination. The students appearing for ATX ignoring TX knowledge have very limited chances to qualify through the exam, since it is covering the major course area. The base knowledge of TX is a must-have since it forms basis of most of the syllabus of ATX. Knowledge of the technical areas that are exclusive to ATX will not on its own will be sufficient to pass the examination. So at this point, we have ample time to actually refer back if we have ignored the TX areas. So if any TX area requires specific attention, you can put it in the question tab and I can focus on them in the coming sessions. If there are any questions, please, you're more than welcome. So the next heading says exam question analysis. We all are familiar with the pattern of the examination that we will be having two sections. Section A question requires candidates to analyze the information provided and use any guidance given to help address the requirements. Any area from different texts can be examined in Section A. Section A is basically having the most marks of your exam. It is around 50 to 55% of your paper. So there can be questions that can only be questioning you for a particular area of text, or maybe putting you up with the multi-text scenarios. Question 1 more or less will require a report, letter, memo, or meeting notes as part of the answer. Questions in these sections are relatively long, hence careful time management is required. This word time management has proved to be the biggest hurdle for the students, since the students having enough knowledge, they are writing more and more for the questions which require a certain definite answer. You have to note here that writing more and more for any particular question will not yield you marks more than the allocation. So the trick here is to stop your pen, to stop from typing at a certain point when you feel your question is addressed. We need to be very much sure about the information we are going to provide. We will not be having enough time to write more and more for the allocated marks. We just need to be specific, we just need to be crunch so that we address the requirements. Moving on to section B, the section B questions contain an introductory paragraph which outlines the technical areas within the question, together with the concise structured information and subheadings to make them easier to assimilate and navigate. This enables candidates to determine which question to answer first without having to read the whole of the questions, which may be useful due to time pressure. The examiner is trying to facilitate you to the most, and this facilitation is provided through the structure of this question. They will be providing you an introductory paragraph and they will be giving you headings and the subheadings so that you can easily navigate and you can easily understand the question requirements, so that which question is to be attempted first can be decided in a more appropriate and timely manner. The questions opted here should be the one that yield more marks. We should not rush into the scenario which we think we are better with. We need to refer to the marks available, and we should ensure that we only go for the question that is going to yield us more marks in the lesser time on priority. There is no specific allocation of numerical calculation and theoretical explanation within TX and ATX. But in practice, as I have already mentioned, in TX, we are more inclined towards the numerical calculations, whereas in ATX, we are more inclined towards the narrative explanations. The calculations we used to perform in TX are to be applied to the given scenario, and the narrative explanations are to be given on those calculations that we used to do. In both exams, the ability of candidates to be able to explain their treatments and opinion on given scenario is crucial and critical. It is important to note that the candidates need to make themselves understood irrespective of the grammar or spelling issues. When we are sitting in the examination, we have certain fears and pressures, and somehow we do not manage to use the correct spelling or grammar. So it is not a point to bother, because if we are making ourselves understood, the advice of tax is given, there is no point of worrying about the grammar and spelling issues. So consider yourself eased at that point. But do not consider my point to just waste out all the spellings and the grammar. You have to try to be good in that too. But if due to exam pressure you have written a sentence and you feel there is some problem with it, you can ignore it if you consider being understood. Any questions till now? The session for today is mainly based on the mistakes that have been committed by the students and the areas that have been identified weak by the examiner. If we are able to understand what mistakes the previous students have committed, we can easily avoid them to maximize our scores. So I will be encouraging you to ask the questions if you have any. I believe at this point of time, you have attempted certain questions from KIT, and you have noticed that there are certain shortcomings in topics you think you are well versed with. It tends to happen that we consider ourselves pretty mature and expert in certain area, but once the question is being set up, we are not able to display that authority to answer that question. So we need to ensure that with the ample knowledge, we are able to decode the requirement and answer the question effectively. Some essentials for the exam are requirement analysis and response planning. So anybody who could write and tell me how to handle a requirement, I would really appreciate if you could write it in the questions tab so that I could have a understanding of how you perceive the requirements of the question. Okay, I believe the students are not much interested in asking the questions. But you are more than welcome to ask, and your input in this session will be very much important so that I could actually link my sessions to the requirements that are being very specific to the students attending the webinar, to ensure Okay, so we are going to analyze how to read and analyze the requirements and give the response to them. The basic question we need to ask ourselves is, what have you been asked to do? Requirement section and document references as provided in the question play a critical role here. In P6 examination and other professionals, the requirement is not 100% written in the required area or at a specific point in question. The requirements are scattered. We need to find all the requirements and the relevant information so that we could provide the quality answer. So the basic point here I am emphasizing on is you have to understand what you have been asked to do. For that, you have to understand the requirement, and through the requirement section, that is the basic structure of the question. And the rest of the requirement can be found in the body of the question. So the total requirement can be scattered in the question, somewhere in the requirement section, somewhere in the body of the question. So please pay attention to each of the areas so that you don't miss out on something important that can actually be very helpful in your exam success. Once you are done with analyzing what you have been asked to do and you are very much clear what are you going to write for it, what you need to do next. Once the requirement is analyzed, once the requirement is understood, you have to plan your answer. You have to clarify it in your mind that this requirement is tapping, for example, income tax and capital gains tax and value added tax at a time. So while constructing my answer, I need to be very much clear about which areas of income tax I am going to use, about which areas of capital gains tax I am going to use, and how I am going to implicate VAT in the given scenario. On the next step, you have to be again ensuring that have you identified the relevant issues. If you have understood that the question, for example, is asking for income tax and VAT implications, you need to be very much sure that all the relevant issues in the question are being identified and noted down so that while producing the answer, you do not misinterpret any information or just do not include it at all in your answer. So do not spend time on issues not asked for, but identify the issues at hand and note them somewhere so that while constructing your answer in your mind, you do not skip any important area or point. Further, you need to be sure that you have followed the guidelines given in the accompanying notes. If you have been asked to write a memo, you have to write a memo. You're not going to answer it in some other casual way. Or if you are asked to write a report, you have to write the report. You are not going to answer it in some other way. So you have to ensure that only the guidelines given by the examiner are followed. You are not adding anything from your own side, because nobody is going to stop you in the examination from adding anything from your side, but this is not going to help you in getting a success score, because you will be wasting time on writing things that are not relevant, and you won't be getting any marks for them. So the wastage of time plus no marks for the matter written is I believe, not a fair deal for a question for an examination like ATX. Further, you have to be very much clear on the point you want to make in your response. For example, if you are asked to calculate income tax liability, the students refer to different areas that are not under question, and they end up their answer writing the income tax payable. This is not relevant at all. You are directed to calculate income tax liability. So you have to calculate income tax liability. Going an extra mile and calculating the income tax payable for the examiner is not going to yield any marks. So you have to be very much clear on which point you are going, on the point you're going to make in your response. If your response is haphazard, if you are not clear before writing or typing into the answer, it is not going to give a clear message to the person who is requiring your opinion or advice in a given issue. As I've already mentioned, that in ATX we are mainly concerned with the narrative explanation. But we cannot simply ignore the calculations. The calculations are equally important where the examiner or the questioner has specified. So while answering, we need to ensure that if the calculations are necessary to make your point, and if they are very much necessary, then have you opted for the smartest way to perform? Till now, you must have done certain questions of the kit, and there are certain areas which can be calculated through a long route and through a short route. So we need to practice ourselves through the shortest way of calculating any issue at hand. Further, it is noticed that in some questions there are certain calculations done by the examiners, and the students, they think that they might not be correct, and they start spending time on reperforming those calculations. Please note that if there is any reperforming of that calculation to be done, it will be mentioned in the question. If there is no mentioning in the question, you are not supposed to do any reperforming of those calculations, because again, they will be wasting your time without giving you any marks. Any questions till now? Okay. Moving further, we need to pay attention to the marks available. Certainly, we are in the examination for the marks and for the passing marks, to be more precise. So the passing marks are very much linked to those 3 hours of the exam. If we are unable to utilize that time effectively, we are going to waste the relevant marks available. Once you are into the question, before writing your question or before rushing into the answer of your question, you need to make sure that you only write the answer in proportion to the marks available. For instance, if the question is for 3 marks and it is asking you to explain the residency status, so you don't need to move into extra areas. You just need to tell, is the person resident, or what are the ties that are being under question in that specific scenario, and the relevant answer will be out, and you will be done in 3 lines for those 3 marks, or maximum in 5 lines you will be explaining all the issues, not more than that. Because if you spend more time, you will not be getting any marks more than the allocation. Moving further, the art in the exam is to stop writing when the time for the allocated marks finishes. It is not that you don't know or you have the limited knowledge. It is like you have a lot to tell the examiner, but you have to contain your thoughts and you have to bring the best response that you could ever produce in those 3 hours for that said issue. Further, you have to ensure you capitalize on the professional marks available in question number 1 and 4. 5 steps can enable you to score these professional marks available. We have seen many students failing at 46, 47, 48, 49, and when we question them, were you able to write answers for the professional marks available? They say we were not aware of those professional marks while we were preparing for the examination. So these marks can be a real lifesaver at that time. So please do not take these professional marks for granted. Be very specific in writing the answers in light of the scenario of the question. The 5 steps that can enable you to score these professional marks easily are: you have to follow the requested format. The format asked by the examiner should be followed religiously. You are not allowed to tweak it or to include your own perception of answering that question. You are being guided to use the report or a memo or an email. You have to do that. Number 2, you have to display the approach of problem solving. The client is at some issue or the firm is at some issue. The tax consultant is at the point of some issue, and while you are answering, your answer should be solving that problem for the concerned persons. If your answer is not solving that problem, you are not there. So while answering, the approach to solve that problem at hand is critical and crucial. Number 3 is explanations and calculations being on point. Once you are in ATX, you are a tax senior or a manager or a partner. So you are not supposed to provide irrelevant explanations or calculations that are going to waste your time plus the time of the person concerned. You have to be very much specific on only the explanation, on providing the explanations that are critical and the calculations that are actually the basic requirement. Linking it to the explanation and calculations, you will be providing the relevant advice. If the question is from your fellow firm that they should be the tax consultant of your client in future, your advice should be in line with the requirement. You're not going to tell them that the client is very good, or its reputation is good, or the client is very helpful in out of pocket expenses. No, the relevant advice, if there is any problem in accepting that assignment, you have to ensure that you communicate it effectively. Or if there is no such issues, you can simply give them a go ahead that this client has no such threats or no issues that can actually limit the scope. The number 5 is effective communication. You have to communicate in such a way that the user actually gets the required message. If you are not able to communicate the message, there is no point of writing the answer, because that is not going to yield any marks. I'm again and again concentrating on this very point, that if you are not able to effectively communicate, you are not going through the examination. This is the main pillar of this examination. You have to explain each and every point that is being asked in the question. And for the candidates who are resitting the exam, those who have failed the exam, unfortunately, they will have some extra pressure that they may fail again, or they may not be able to display uh, good again and may flunk the paper. This is not the point here. You need to be very much confident on what you have done. Plus, there are certain tips that can help you. You have to keep an eye on the additional marks required to hit the pass grades with areas which were weak in the previous attempt. For example, if a candidate has scored 38 marks, he is in deficit of 12 marks. Those 12 marks can be earned from any area that was untapped in the previous attempt, or maybe due to poor performance in that attempt in the area that was addressed. So you have to concentrate that what areas are going to bring you those additional marks to achieve the pass grade. They can be the areas that are already done in the previous attempt, or they may be areas that you can work on which you have not worked in the previous attempt. You also have to focus on the areas which you feel you are comfortable with and you can have more potential marks. If you were very much in command on trading losses, for example, trading losses tends to get very tricky while sitting in the examination, because the most asked way for the trading losses is that you have to chart out the trading losses, ensuring the most benefit to the taxpayer, in which you have different options to explore, and the answer may tend to extend than your expectation. Again, if the question extends more than your expectation, the marks available remain the same. So containing the question in proportion to the examination, in proportion to the available marks, is going to be the key. Further, time management can be a very critical part that has flunked your paper in the previous attempt. Maybe you are not able to complete the 100 marks of the paper. You have to ensure, again, I'm concentrating and I'm focusing again and again on this particular area, that do not waste your time in writing extra information or providing the information that is not being asked. You have to manage your time for every mark, for every minute, so that no time is wasted at all. You should not let go of the professional marks, since I have already mentioned that professional marks are very easy to be scored. I have not yet received any questions. I would again request you people, if there are any questions relating to the exam technique, you are more than welcome to ask. I will be very happy to answer those questions. Please go through the handout for for the 2 minute time and consolidate what have you been guided. Once we are done with it, we will be moving on the examiner comments of the previous attempt, and we will be looking at questions that were presented to the candidates, and what were the areas where candidates performed extraordinarily well, and what were the areas where the candidate were not able to display the required knowledge and application. 2 to 3 minutes to consolidate. And meanwhile, any questions are welcome. Okay, guys, I hope the previous uh, points communicated to you will be very helpful for you to pass the exam and to add in your uh, practice and to add the points in your revision and practice sessions. So what we are going to do next is, we are going to analyze uh, March-June attempt 2021. We will be basically analyzing question number 1 and question number 2. Question number 1 being 35 marks. We will not be doing this question today, but we will surely be doing many questions in the coming days. The idea to incorporate this section in today's session is to understand the examiner expectation and the response that the students are providing. Once we are able to understand what the students were writing and what was the response of the examiner on those answers by the candidate, we are in a very better position. We are in a very better position to know what are the likes and what are the dislikes of the examiner. And I don't need to mention, you are all very much aware of it. If you do the dislikes of the examiner, you are in deep trouble. But if you are able to display what the examiner likes, then bingo, it is for you. You are going through the exam in the shining colors. You have been given this question paper in the handouts. You can refer to that for question 1, and I will suggest you go through its requirement. I believe all of us have opened that question number 1. Okay, if you see on slide number 5, it says scenario 1 requirements. It says you should assume that today's date is 1st June 2021. Prepare the notes for the meeting as requested in the email from your manager. The following marks are available. In Part A, they are concerned with liquidation of VNL Limited Company. The first requirement in Part A is concerned with sale of intangible fixed assets, and the second requirement is concerned with the timing of payments to shareholders. The B part is related to unincorporated business, where you have to prepare notes for the meeting for your manager in relevance to the accounting date in Part 1, and in Part 2 for the costs already incurred and the business premises. So I haven't gone through the question fully, but I just have indulged myself in the requirements. I will be only looking at the requirement A. It says sale of intangible fixed assets. So how do we treat sale of intangible fixed assets? The general idea is that intangible fixed assets uh, follow the treatment as we do in the accounting, and we will have certain book value of our assets, and when we sell them, we will get sale proceeds. We will compare them with the book value, and we will arrive at a gain or maybe a loss. So it is worth 4 marks. So we need to cover all the aspects that we potentially consider are being relevant in this. It says professional marks will be awarded for the approach taken to problem solving, the clarity of the explanation and calculation, and the effectiveness with which the information is communicated, and the overall presentation and slide of the meeting notes. So the meeting notes, they are actually the basic thing that you have while you are conversating with your client or maybe the partner. So if the meeting notes are on point, they can bring you in a very good situation or a very good position to negotiate and implement your point. But if the meeting notes are not accurate, they are not actually hitting the point which is intended, the sole purpose of that meeting is compromised. So these meeting notes are very critical for your manager, and you have to cover all these aspects. There are 4 areas for which you have to prepare the notes. Number 1 is sale of intangible fixed assets. Number 2 is timing of the payments to shareholders. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. If without going into the scenario, I ask you that what does the timing of payment to shareholders refer to? Can anyone please write down the answer in the question section? This second requirement of part A is referring to what topic? It is worth 7 marks. Can anyone please? Okay, I will encourage you if you can actually give your input in this. Okay, I believe you people are reluctant in writing the questions or even answering me, but no worries. We have this 5-day session. I hope you will get yourself comfortable shortly. So now I'm moving on to the slide number 5, where it is giving a debrief of liquidation of VNL Limited. The background says, as we have discussed, the company's shareholder have decided to liquidate the company. A liquidator will be appointed on 1st August 2021. I set out below the information you asked for in relation to the sale of the company's intangible fixed assets, together with the request for further advice in relation to the payments to be made by the company to its shareholder. Once we go through the background, we understand that the company is being liquidated, and the company is being liquidated with the appointment of the liquidator. So the second point in question was the withdrawal of investment from the company. The shareholders will be withdrawing their investments from the company, and in this case the liquidator is appointed. So either the transaction is taxed as income stream or a capital payment, depending upon the appointment of liquidator. In this case, liquidator is appointed. Let's read the whole question so that we could get a better idea when it was done. So, sale of intangible fixed assets. On 1st September 2018, VNL Limited purchased the trade and assets of a business from an unrelated company. The assets included goodwill and a brand name as detailed below. These assets will be sold on 31st July 2021. So we are given with the goodwill and the brand name. We have sale proceeds as given in the question. We have their cost given, and we have their amortization since acquisition. So all the calculations are being done. There is no point of recalculating the amortization until and unless it is advised in the question. We further drill down the question. An interim payment will be made to the shareholders, followed by a final payment at the conclusion of the liquidation, which will take place in February 2022. I have been asked to consider the possibility of making the interim payment prior to the appointment of liquidator. It is purely concerned with the appointment of liquidator so that the transaction can be treated as an income stream that is going to be taxed under income tax, or maybe as a capital repayment where it could be taxed at various rates. If the entrepreneur relief is available, it may be taxed at 10%, or if it is not available, it may be taxed at higher rates. So we need to be giving a crisp advice on this. So if I refer back to my handout, for this requirement, different students have performed. The examiner comments on the performance of the student was the command word here is to calculate. We need to focus on the command word. If it says calculate, you have to calculate. If it says explain, you have to explain. You are not going to add unnecessary explanation when it says calculate, and you are not at all welcome to add calculations when it says explain. Time utilized writing the explanation will not be yielding any marks, as the question is already for 4 marks and we have 2 assets in question. We are not going to write the unrequired explanations here. So the candidates should aim for the clear labeling of figures and perhaps brief explanations of what is being done, but without wasting time on lots of descriptive explanations. The examiner has specifically said that you have to calculate. The candidates who have not only calculated but have written explanations may have done the right thing as per their understanding, but these explanations, they are not going to yield any extra marks. The approach to attempt the question should be in line with the requirement as asked. For instance, it is required to calculate the post-tax proceeds, which you will see further in the notes that they say you have to calculate the post-tax proceeds arising out of some disposals. The candidate must ensure they seek for the best approach to sort out the questions. Anyone from the attendees who could throw light on the approach we could use for this question? Okay, so you are not in the mood to answer, no worries at all. Okay, if we are asked to calculate post-tax proceeds, what does it specify? That it is asking you for the post-tax proceeds. General approach for the post-tax proceeds can be we use the sale proceeds, we subtract the net book value, and we get the gain or loss, as we are directed to calculate the gain and loss as well. Once we calculate the gain and loss, we might forget that the post-tax proceeds are not concerned with the gain or loss. The post-tax proceeds are simply the proceeds net of the tax impact. Once we calculate the tax impact, either it can be a tax saving or either it can be a tax charge. We can adjust it with the sale proceeds, and that will be our post-tax proceeds that we need to calculate as instructed by the examiner. The candidates must ensure that they seek for the best approach to sort this question, as I have already mentioned. The first intangible asset sold was goodwill, and the candidates were told that the amortization of this goodwill had not been a tax deductible expense for the company. As a result, full unamortized cost was to be used for the computation of gain or loss. If we go to the question, It states that the goodwill had not been a tax deductible expense for the company. The amortization of this goodwill has not been a tax deductible expense for the company. Guys, there is some technical disruption in the internet. Give me 5 minutes and I will be back on air. Okay. Okay, so some people are asking me to introduce myself and what is my experience in teaching. My name is Shuja and I teach in Scan School of Accountancy, Islamabad. And my teaching experience is around 10 years. And so far, it is good in terms that I have produced some good result in F6 and P6 examination. So this is my teaching experience. And the rest of the comments I have noted, some students have asked me to concentrate on capital allowances in future sessions and some other topics. I will note these questions, and in our future sessions we will be addressing all of these areas that you have specified. Plus, certain students have been asking for the original convener of this session, Sir Zuhaib. That can be answered by the organizer of this meeting. I believe there was some emergency and I'm covering him up for this. Okay, so back to the question. And I will try to zoom that goodwill thing for the students. Here is the goodwill. The sale proceeds is 75,000. The cost is 95,000. amortization since acquisition is 19,000. If I move to the treatment, the first intangible asset was sold. Sold was goodwill, and the candidates were told that amortization of this goodwill had not been a tax deductible expense for the company. As a result, full unamortized cost was to be used for the computation of the gain or loss. For instance, consider if someone ignores this fact that it is not a tax deductible expense for the scenario, the whole answer will be jeopardized. We are going to subtract the amortization, we will yield the wrong gain or loss, and it will compromise the question. So we need to understand what we have been asked for. As I have already mentioned in first section, that you need to be very careful about what the requirement is and what are the relevant information that is being given in the examination. The second intangible asset sold was the brand, which has been amortized. As this is an intangible asset held by the company, it should be assumed that this amortization is tax deductible unless told otherwise. The question will specifically mention that this is not tax deductible. If it is not mentioned, it is considered as tax deductible. Several candidates incorrectly calculated the amortization of the brand at 4%, but the question specifically states no election to write it off at the fixed rate had been made. So if the election to write it off at 4% was not made, it was not required to recalculate it at 4%. Students doing that have clearly misunderstood the question and the information given, and they have risked their answers. The question is not yet addressed as the post-tax proceeds are to be calculated. The proceeds of both the assets are to be combined and tax impact adjusted to address the requirement, as I have already mentioned, that you have to calculate the post-tax proceeds. For post-tax proceeds, you have to calculate the gain or loss on both the disposals, and you have to adjust it with the sale proceeds. This will form the post-tax proceeds. A common mistake, as mentioned by the examiner in the question of such nature, is to take the profit or loss on disposal and to adjust it for the tax figure. If it says post-tax proceeds, you have to utilize the sale proceeds for the calculation, not the profit or loss. You might end up calculating something that was not actually asked. But it should also be remembered that when looking for the post-tax proceeds from the disposal of an asset, the cost itself is no longer relevant. And although this does feature in the profit or loss on which tax is based, it is the proceeds which are important as adjusted for the tax paid or saved. So the basic idea is, if it says that you have to calculate post-tax proceeds, you have to calculate post-tax proceeds. You have to ignore the cost, you have to ignore each and everything, and concentrate on number one, sale proceeds, number two, the tax impact. Either it is the tax charge or either it is a tax save, that is either a profit, either a loss. Doing anything out of this is not going to help the cause. Okay guys, uh, we will be back in 15 minutes break. It is 9:40 at this time, and we will be back after 15 minutes for the rest of the session. And meanwhile, I'll go through all the questions as asked, and I will try to respond it in this session later. Thank you. Okay, guys, welcome back. Yes, I will be providing you the written answer to the questions I'm referring to. Today's session is basically based on the do's and the don'ts of the examination mainly, and the two questions under consideration today, they are mainly be analyzed on the mistakes that students committed in previous attempts, and also appreciating those points by the examiner which students performed nicely or exceptionally well. So the answer of these questions I will be providing you in the later sessions when we will be doing the corporation tax and income tax questions. Plus, I have noted the capital allowances as being asked by one of the attendees. Osman Heather, I am sorry, I was not able to see the comments. I will refer to the comments you made and I'll be answering them. Okay, corporation tax. We will be working on that, inshallah. Yes, Natalie Green, you were right. We have to read the requirement first. Ravi, you're very right. Once we read the requirement, this will tell us how to structure our answer. Okay, great. I'm overwhelmed by the questions. Thank you so very much for all these questions. And I hope that I am able to answer all these questions in the future sessions. And if there are any questions till now, you are very much welcome to ask. I will be very happy to answer the questions. Okay. Till now, we have analyzed part one of the question where we were required to calculate post-tax proceeds. The examiner has clearly mentioned that the students were not able to gather all the points that were very specifically mentioned in the question. If we do not read the question and we do not highlight the relevant issues, we are not at all in a position to produce a right answer. And questions like these, where 4 easy marks are available, everybody knows the treatment. If you have just gone through once from this topic, you know how to treat intangible assets. There is no problem in that. But if you do not understand what the examiner has asked you in this specific scenario, you are not going to present the answer that is required. And many students, they did not followed the requirement, they did not follow the guidelines, and they were not able to perform well. And this is what examiner has said. Moving on, when it says post-tax proceeds, the requirement is very much clear that you have to consider proceeds and you have to consider the tax impact. You have to net them off and bring up an answer. If you are not doing that, if you are using any other component, you are not actually addressing the answer. Okay, basis period, yes, we will be dealing with basis periods in coming session. Tomorrow we will be doing a full-fledged question of basis period, and I will be explaining you the opening year rules and the closing year rules. Yes, plus CIP, CSOP, EMIs, and SEI treatments and knowledge. Definitely, Ravi, I will try to extend my support on these topics as well. We will pick up a question in which all these share investment schemes are under question. so that we can address your answer accordingly. Okay, so we go for the second part of this question. It is worth 7 marks. Command word in this requirement is explain. The candidates required to dissect the requirements to reach out what is to be explained. Now, when the question says explain, the candidate thinks that they need to explain. This is it. They do not specify which point is to be explained. If we do not pinpoint that particular area which we need to explain, we will be wasting time in providing explanations to the areas which are not being asked. The question says timing of the payments to the shareholder. In the background, it is very clear that the liquidator has been appointed on 1st August 2021. So this is the liquidation case, and we need to discuss the outcomes if a transaction is treated as an income distribution or if a transaction is distributed as a capital payment. The candidates were able to understand what is required, but when they started answering, there were certain loopholes that were left, which are being explained by the examiner like this. This requires an explanation of tax rates which shareholders will pay the amount received from the company depending on the timing of the payment. Within the first exhibit, it is stated that there would be a final payment to the shareholders at the conclusion of liquidation, but consideration was being given to making an interim payment prior to appointment of the liquidator. If anyone can please tell me uh, if the payment is made prior to the appointment of liquidator, what is the treatment, and what is the treatment if the income, if the payment is made after the appointment of the liquidator? I'm waiting for the answers. ATX WhatsApp group link. Okay, I will talk to the organizers for this, and if there is any, I will send. Okay, right answer, Ravi. The consideration is either it could be a dividend income or either it could be a capital repayment depending upon the appointment of the liquidator. Before appointment, payment will be treated as dividend, attracting income tax. So what will be the taxes if it is treated as a dividend? There are basic rate taxes, there are high rate taxes, and there are additional rate taxes, right? So if we consider an interim payment before the appointment of the liquidator, we are going to attract the tax at maybe basic rate, at maybe high rate, at maybe additional rate. While if the payment is made after the appointment of liquidator, it will be treated as a capital payment, and a capital payment will be attracting three tax rates. Anyone who could tell me which rates will be applicable if it is treated as a capital payment? The major rate to consider here is the entrepreneur relief rate. If the students consider only the rates of CGT, that is 10% or 20%, this will not at all be ample in this question. The examiner is really focusing on the utilization of that entrepreneur relief. If the student totally misses out on that, there will be fewer chances to provide the answer that will satisfy the examiner. Many candidates were very good at dealing with the pre-liquidation payment, correctly identifying that it would be treated as dividend and detailing the potential tax rates. The scenario had specifically stated that shareholder would be a mix of basic and high rate taxpayers. Some candidates merely referred to the dividend treatment but did not go on to discuss in sufficient detail the specific tax rates which would apply to these type of shareholders. Therefore, they did not score the marks available for this. So this is the comment from the examiner team. They say that you were able to identify, but you were not able to actually explain the identified impact. If it is a basic rate taxpayer, what will be the treatment? Anyone from you? If it is a high rate taxpayer, what will be the treatment? What rates will be applying? So if there is any particular area which requires further deep explanation, you need to provide that so that you add meaning to that statement and you do the effective communication. If you miss out on that, your advice will not at all be complete. In this context, it is important that the candidates do ensure that they are happy with the precise detail of the question requirement before beginning their answer. So if you are not sure that you are going to tell that these rates, or we will treat it as an income distribution, but you are not going to tell them that for high rate taxpayer it will be applied at which rate, for additional rate taxpayer it will be applied at which rate, and for basic rate taxpayer it will be applied at which rate, there will be no or minimum marks available. You have to plan this before rushing into writing the answer. It's always worth going back to double check exactly what it is, what they have been asked to do, perhaps by highlighting the keywords in the question so that they stand out when working on the response. One thing I would like to add here is that when we are doing when we are writing it, when we are typing it, we type and we simply erase it. We don't realize that in typing and erasing we are wasting a lot of time. While we were doing the paper work, when we used to cut, we knew that we have wasted time on these 4 lines and we have just put a cross on them. So we had the realization of wastage of time on that. But when we are attempting it on the computer, we write, we erase. So we don't actually get bothered by any cuttings on the paper, which is a very big alarm that plenty of time is wasted in unrequired writing and erasing. So please be careful that you are not indulged into that. Further, many candidates were able to identify that the final payment by the liquidator would be treated as a capital payment, but not all went to discuss the rates of the capital gains which the shareholder would then pay. Not only were the standard rates of capital gain of 10% or 20% were relevant, but also the single rate of 10% for basic and high rate taxpayer if the entrepreneur relief was available were to be applied. Students, if you miss out on entrepreneur relief applicable, the basic topic in consideration. Okay, Jahangir. Okay, for tomorrow's class, we will be majorly concerning capital allowances and basis period and their relevant planning. So you could go through the income tax portion and we will be doing those questions. Okay, so the question at hand, the topic under discussion is withdrawal of investment from the company by its shareholders. There are several ways of withdrawing the investment from the company. All the ways have one constant thing that you need to consider is the application of entrepreneur relief. If the application of entrepreneur relief is there, the applicable rate will be 10%. That is only higher for a basic rate taxpayer. So a basic rate taxpayer would disregard the capital repayment, but any taxpayer other than basic rate taxpayer would always be inclined for the application of capital repayment, as the entrepreneur relief will bring it relief at the rate of 10%. This rate is lesser in case of a high rate taxpayer, in case of an additional rate taxpayer. So it will be very much beneficial for any taxpayer who is having the availability of entrepreneur relief to disregard the income distribution and to treat it as a capital repayment. So the student missing out on mentioning the fact of the entrepreneur relief, they actually uh, they actually allowed the examiner to slip through into their mind and get an impression that the student is not well versed with this topic overall, because this topic has very much uh, this topic is significantly linked with the application of entrepreneur relief, and if you miss out on that, you are not considered as well versed with the topic. So this was the mistake that students made, and they were not at all able to make the mark in the exam. Any questions? Don't worry, guys. I am noting the questions, and I will be addressing all the questions. All the topics that you mention here will be dealt with extensively. If you want me to just go through the questions, solve them for you, I can do that. But if you want me to explain the topic, I will be explaining them in detail. No worries about it. Basis period, for sure, they will be explained in detail, and we will be doing its question, as the basis period has been a point of botheration for many students. Okay, moving on. Part B. It's worth 8 marks. It says that you have, again, prepare the notes for the meeting as requested in the email by your manager, and you have to discuss for this time for an unincorporated business the implications of an accounting date. Okay, when we say an incorporated business, what does an unincorporated business implicate? Purely, it is not corporation tax. It is concerned with income tax. It is concerned with an enterprise not being operated as a corporation. And when it is not corporation, there comes the involvement of basis periods. There were 3 subparts of within this requirement. The first asked for calculation of Joey taxable trading profit for his first 2 years of trading, assuming he were to adopt a 31st July accounting date. Okay. I can now confirm that I will commence trading as an unincorporated trader on 1st November 2021. Once I go through this background and I know that I need to calculate the taxable total profits for this person, I need to prepare basis periods. And to prepare basis periods, we need to have two dates clearly being identified. Number one is the date on which the trade started. So it is telling you that it is the 1st November 2021. So the date of start of business is 1st November 2021, and it says that the accounts will be prepared till 31st July. So we have got the first accounting period of the business. This required knowledge of an unincorporated trader opening year rules from TX UK. So if you are not comfortable with the basis periods in F6, you cannot actually display uh, your skills in ATX as well, because you are not comfortable with the basis period rules. We will be discussing basis periods in detail, but as far as this question is concerned, firstly, it involved a calculation of trading profits for the relevant accounting period, for that is 31st July 2022 to 31st July 2023, and then the basis period for tax year 21, 22, 22 and 23 needed to be determined in order to establish how much of the accounting period profit should be assessed in each of the tax year concerned. Let me explain. When the trader prepares its accounts and it gives you the relevant taxable total profits, you make the basis periods. Those taxable total profits are used in making those taxable total profits, and they are apportioned as per the tax year through basis periods. So if we do not perform the right calculation of the basis periods, the relevant profits will not be calculated, and application of the right rule of opening for the basis period will be the key here. The matter of fact here is, I would like to emphasize that for attempting the question of basis period rightly, you have to identify two dates at once. That is the date of start of business. Number two is the first accounting date. Both of these dates make the first accounting period. Both of these dates make the first accounting period. So if I say you need to have date of start of business plus first accounting date. I hope you can see this. I can increase the zoom. Both of these dates, they will be making my first accounting period. Now, once my first accounting period is identified, I need to ascertain number of tax years involved in the first accounting period plus the duration of first accounting period. Since I mentioned there is no problem in spellings, I'm making all these mistakes. So this is the key. If you are able to find the date of start of business, the first accounting date, you are able to find the first accounting period. You have to dissect the first accounting period to ascertain the number of tax years involved and the duration of the first accounting period, because this is going to bring the appropriate rule that you are going to apply. I hope you are comfortable with this. Okay, CGT reliefs. always difficult to pick the questions. Please explain in detail. For example, BADR, gift relief. Okay, sure. This will be done. Okay. Anyone having trouble till now? I believe no. So the examiner comments further say that, and then basis period of okay needed to determine in order to okay. Some candidates missed out on first of these steps and therefore did not score the available marks for initially calculating the trading profits for the accounting period based on the revised 31st July accounting date. If we go to the requirement, there were two requirements. We are concerned with the accounting date here. And in the exam, they say that once you are going to choose one accounting date, and later on it says that you are going to change that accounting date. When you change the accounting date, as I have mentioned, then your first accounting date, in first scenario it was 31st July, in the other scenario it will be changed. So the basis period will change. When the basis period will change, the number of months involved will be changed. When the number of months involved will be changed, the taxable total profits will be different for both the cases. So the students were missing out this approach. They were not able to display when they use the 31st July accounting date and when they use the date other than 31st July accounting date. It is important to appreciate that TX UK knowledge can be tested at this level. Therefore, if the candidates do feel less confident on certain brought forward knowledge areas, they should aim to identify these and work to improve their technical knowledge on these aspects. So if any one of you is not comfortable from the areas brought forward from F6 examination, my recommendation is that you please go through them. You have ample time, please go through them. And in these 5 days, I will be trying to explain the critical areas so that this session proves fruitful for you. The second part of this requirement is asked for the comment on the possible effect of the Joe income tax liability for the first 2 years of trading of adopting 31st July accounting date as previously calculated rather than 31st March given in the examination. So there are two dates given. One is 31st March and one is 31st July. They will both have different number of months. They will both have different basis periods and different taxable total profits, tax adjusted trading profits. Now, the second part is mainly concerned with the cost already incurred and the business premises. Can anyone tell me what is the implication of the cost already incurred in trading income rules? I am opening the dialog box of the comment section so that I could see the answer. What is the rule for such kind of expenditures? Okay, no worries. This is covered in pre-trading expenditures, and the pre-trading expenditures are allowed if they are of revenue nature and they are incurred in previous 7 years. Sorry, Kamran, which question did you ask? Okay, I will see it and I will explain. Don't worry. I'm sorry if I missed out on that. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so I am talking about the pre-trading expenditures. The pre-trading expenditures are allowed as tax deductible, as being tax deductible if they are incurred in previous 7 years and they are of revenue nature. So we have to ensure two things. If the expenditure is of capital nature, we are not simply going to allow it, and if the expenditures are not in the bracket of 7 years from the commencement of the trade, we are again going to ignore it. So this is the rules. And now we see what the students were doing. The second part of this requirement asks for the comment on the possible effect of the job income tax liability for the first 2 years of trading of adopting a 31st July accounting date rather than that of the 31st March given in the examination. Many candidates were able to successfully compare the number under both the scenarios and to provide the appropriate comment on the impact of taxable amounts and resulting the tax liabilities. Many also considered the impact of the alternate dates on the overlap profits. Obviously, when we change the dates, there is an impact on the overlap profits. They might increase, they might decrease depending upon the scenario that we apply. The third part asks for two advantages other than in relation to the income tax liability for adopting a 31st July year end rather than 31st March. Many candidates were able to identify the increased time between earning in profits and paying the tax, and also the benefit of having longer period for planning purposes in terms of increasing the gap between knowing the amount of taxable profits and end of the relevant tax year. Okay, let me explain 3 points here for you. When we have change of accounting date, when we are considering two different accounting dates, number one thing is we need to consider the overlap profits. There might be an increased overlap profits where we are going to block or cash, number one. Maybe there are decreased overlap profits where we might restrict the amount of cash blocked in overlap profits. So it could go both ways. So you have to be very considerate about which way it is going in a particular scenario, number one. Number two is when we change the date, we get the administrative advantage of having a longer period for planning purposes. When we have ample time, we could see the relevant rules being applied on us, the relevant remedies we have for certain areas. So we have a better outcome, better planning time, and we could execute our rules in a better way. And the third point is there is an increased time between the earning of profit and paying the tax. If the period is prolonged, we earn the profits and we delay the tax on them. So these are the three cases. This may go to the cash flow advantage that you can defer the related tax and you can have the tax flow advantage. Yes, it's okay, Kamran. Thank you. Thank you. So any questions till now? So for such question, you have to understand that if it is asking you for the pre-trading expenditures, you use the basis of TX examination, that why pre-trading expenditure rules were made and how are they going to apply on this particular scenario and how are we going to use it to address the specific requirement. The students missing out on the key areas were not able to score well, and the students capitalizing the areas, they were able to score handsomely. Part 2, it is worth 12 marks. It is concerned with those pre-trading expenditures. Okay, this part of the question involved an explanation of whether or not Joe could obtain tax reduction for certain expense he incurred before starting the trade. It also asked whether or not he could recover the associated input VAT on these costs. Now, we have such scenarios where the VAT is tested along with income tax or corporation tax. Now here, with pre-trading expenditures, it is also discussing the associated input VAT. Now we need to be very much sure about the treatment of associated input VAT. Input VAT can be on services or maybe on goods. We have different rules for the services and we have different rules for the goods. I hope everyone remembers them. The expenses incurred related to three things in this particular question. I'm sorry. Three things: consultancy services, computer equipment, and the business premises. So, consultancy services. Are these a revenue expenditure or a capital expenditure? Kamran, if you could please answer me on this, or anyone from the attendees. Consultancy services, being a revenue expenditure or a capital expenditure question mark. Number two, computer equipment. What are very good, Ravi? These are the revenue expenditures, so mainly they will be tax deductible. Number two is the computer equipment. Computer equipment, will it be categorized as a revenue expenditure or a capital expenditure? Very good. It's a capital expenditure, and it will be it will not be treated as a tax adjusted trading tax deductible expense. Then what will be its implication? We will be calculating capital allowances on that computer equipment. Great. And then it comes the business premises. The business premises, since the structural building allowance has been introduced, we have to consider that the business premises may also qualify for them. But if it qualifies or if it does not qualify, but it never qualifies for being a tax deductible item here. So among all these things, we have only the consultancy services that we are going to expense out. Rest we are not going to expense out. Very good, Kamran. Very good. And very good, Ravi. Thank you for participation and making me feel good by answering the questions. Thank you so much again. Okay. Now, what most candidates did? Most candidates correctly identified the capital allowances would be available on the computer equipment, but most didn't address the issue as to whether or not tax deduction could be available for the cost of premises. The cost of premises was not addressed by many students. This involved an appreciation of the fact that the premises would not qualify for the structure and building allowance since they were constructed before 29th October 2018. As far as dealing, okay, before moving on to the VAT, I have explained that you have to consider the buildings for the structure and building allowance. In this case, it was not being applied, but you have to explain why it is not being applied and why it is being applied if we are going to apply it. Okay. Okay. As far as dealing with the VAT aspects of the question, a knowledge of detailed rules and time limits for recovery of pre-registration input VAT was required, and it is 6 months prior to VAT registration for services and 4 years prior to VAT registration for goods. A number of candidates demonstrated that they were aware that the time limit existed but were not sufficiently precise as to exactly what these were. So the candidates were writing that there were certain time limits, but the candidates were not explaining that what time limits were for the services, for the input VAT recovery of services and for the goods. A detailed rather than purely superficial knowledge of the tax rules is required in order to score well in this exam. Many candidates were confused regarding the input recovery, VAT input recovery on the business premises. This is challenging area of the syllabus. Joe intended to use 2/3 of the premises for his trade and to rent out the remaining 1/3. So the portion rented out can never be used for the recovery of the input VAT. This meant that he could recover 2/3 of the input VAT on the original cost, but given that the leasing is an exempt supply for the VAT purpose, would not be able to recover the input VAT on that. In order to change the position and be able to recover the full amount of full input VAT, including that relating to the part which was let out, Joe would need to opt to tax the building, definitely. So the examiner once again specifies that the requirement was clear, that the requirement was asking you for the pre-trading expenditure treatment and was asking you for the treatment of the structural building allowance and the capital allowances available on the computer equipment. Also, the pre-registration input VAT rules. The students, considering all these points, were able to score well. The students not considering all these points were not able to score well and were not able to gain marks. Okay. Sure, Ravi, we will do that. The professional skills in this question, the requirement was to prepare notes for use at a meeting with the client covering a number of different tax issues. Candidates should try to remember two key points when addressing requirements of such nature. First, any explanation provided should be concise but comprehensive enough to form the basis of discussion with the client. You don't need to throw unnecessary explanations, but you cannot restrict those explanations that can be beneficial for the client. So you have to be crisp and comprehend. Secondly, the notes should be presented in a logical and a structured way such that they could be used to follow in a meeting. If you prepare the notes in a haphazard way, the user will not be able to comprehend using those notes. So consider yourself being in a meeting and the notes are being prepared by someone which are not which are haphazard. You will not be able to make an impact that is desired. So the notes should be presented in a very logical and a structured way. Candidates who scored well addressed all the parts of the question, structured their answer according to the matters to be addressed, which were clearly set out in the manager's email, wrote concisely in short, clear paragraphs, provided easy to follow calculations, and demonstrated a logical thought process in addressing each of the relevant issues. What do we implicate from a logical thought process? When we say that we need to recover pre-registration input VAT, the logical approach says that either it's a good, either it's a service. If it is a good, this is the time period. If it is a service, this is the time period. This is it. There is no point apart from this. And if the student follows this boundary, they will be providing answers within the time and as per the expectations. In summary, candidates who provided satisfactory answers to this question were being able to do the following: directly address each of the tasks within the manager email, that they were very much clear about what they were asked and they were very much clear how to answer and how to construct their answer or their response. Secondly, the students who were able to demonstrate a good knowledge of tax rules for the companies and unincorporated traders, including relevant areas brought forward from the APCA UK, and application of their knowledge appropriately to the scenario and provide concise explanations when required. I would like to add 2 points here. If you are able to highlight which area to target or which rules to mention, but you are not linking it to the scenario for P6, you are not on the right path. You have to ensure that for ATX examination, you link it to the scenario. If you fail to link it to the scenario, you will not get the marks. And secondly, the question number 1 or can be testing the combination of taxes. In this question, we have seen that income tax has been tested, that some aspects of VAT has been taxed, some area from corporation tax, specifically the withdrawal of investment, a classic examiner favorite, was tested. So if you are not able to address the requirements involving multi-tax scenarios, you will not be able to produce a quality answer that is going to yield quality marks for you. So my recommendation would be that you read the requirement, you read the whole question, you dissect it, and you mark or you highlight the key points. The information that you have to leave should be left. The information that have to be capitalized has to be capitalized. The areas which are being involved should be dealt with within the limits, within the boundaries of that scenario. If we leave the scenario, we might end up in overdoing or underdoing. Both are not at all welcomed by the examiner. Any questions till now? Okay. Yes, Kamran. In tomorrow's session, I will be once I'll explain the capital allowances and basis period. I will be moving on doing the questions where I will be. I am noting it with me. I will be telling you how to write answer in the notes format. Definitely, I will be sharing how to write a memo, how to write answers in the notes. And also, if there is any specific question in the kit or in the past examination, past exams you wish I will be doing it. You just have to share the question number with me. Yes, Kamran, there are questions related to ethics, and question number 1 and 4 specifically asks you about ethics, and I believe there are 4 to 6 marks that are available in this. And in this session, we have discussed them. I think you were not in the meeting at that time, but if any question involves such a topic, I will be covering it again for you. Okay. This is the second question we will be covering. If we cover it earlier than the stipulated time, we will call it a day. But I believe it will take some time because this question is a classic question involving many aspects of different taxes. Again, we are going to analyze this question for the do's and for the don'ts. The students who scored well, and the students who didn't score well. So the part A is of 5 marks. I will be a little quick to conclude on this. As I see, there are attendees who are leaving because the do's and don'ts are not very much welcomed by you people. I understand that you want me to do the questions. I will be doing them, but analyzing this is very much important because when we will be doing the questions, I will be bringing forward all the knowledge that we have gained through in this session. Okay, this part of the question tested knowledge of the actions to be taken before becoming Fiona's tax advisor. The ethics question is here, Mr. Kamran. This was a standard ethics requirement, and many candidates were able to score well on this part of the question. However, when answering any ethics question dealing with aspects such as these, the need to address any threats to compliance with fundamental principles such as integrity, professional competence, and due care should be borne in mind. So, majorly when we get majorly when the question of ethics is at hand in P6, we are majorly concerned with these 3 fundamental principles, that is integrity, professional competence, and due care. If any such threat is identified, now the basic approach is we say that we do not wish to have any such threat. But if such threat is there, what can we do? We can incorporate the safeguards, the appropriate safeguards, so that we could bring down those risks to an acceptable level if they cannot be eliminated fully. The first try is that we try to eliminate them fully, but if we are not able to do that, If we are not able to do that, we have to put in the safeguards so that those issues are mitigated. A small but significant number of candidates suggested that Fiona address and proof of identity should be obtained, but when we will go through the question, we will see that this has already been done by the examiner. Despite being specifically told in the question, this has already happened. So, in we have uh, we have made it very clear in our minds that these are the 4 things or 5 things that we have to implement on any ethics question. This is not the case. You have to read the scenario. I have told you many times that the scenario is the key. If the examiner has explained that this particular thing has happened, you will write it, but you will not get any mark because this has already been done by the examiner in the question. There is no point of adding such things. They will be only wasting your time but not yielding you any marks. So anything that has been done in the question by the examiner, you should not waste on duplicating that effort because this is not going to yield you any marks. Before starting on the answer, it is always worth rechecking the requirement and information contained within the scenario to avoid wasting time on points that cannot earn marks and that have already been explained. Okay, Kamran, I hope some of the part of ethics is being cleared. How to go for the ethics question, you have to look for the basic fundamental principles in question, number one. Number two, you have to look if you could eliminate them 100%. If you cannot eliminate them 100%, then you could bring in the appropriate safeguards because it's a dynamic environment. You are not able to 100% mitigate them. You have to bring in the appropriate safeguards. And the most important thing here I mentioned is that you are in specifically the questions of ethics. There are many things that are being mentioned by the examiner. The students redo them simply. Redoing them will not earn any marks. Okay. The part B, this part required a calculation of inheritance tax payable on a gift made during Fiona's lifetime and arising because of her death. Okay. Can anyone tell me if we do a lifetime gift, what are the tax implications in case of gift being made to an individual and in terms of gift being made to a trust? Kamran, I would like to see your reply, and I know that Ravi is going to reply me instantly on this. As expected, Ravi, that's good. For CLT, it could be 20% and it could be 25%. Gagandeep, very right. It can be a pet or CLT. Okay, good. Let me completely phrase it for you people. If a gift is made during the lifetime and that gift is made to a person, that is a pet. And if it is made to a trust, it is a CLT. If it is a pet, there are no tax implications at the time of gift. Am I right, Ravi? If it is a pet, there are no tax implications at the time of gift. But if it is a CLT, as you have mentioned, there will be a tax at the rate of 20% or 25%, depending upon the tax being paid by the donor or being paid by the donee. If the donor pays the tax, then 100% of the gift will be the value of the gift plus the 20% tax. And when the donee pays the tax, the 100% of the gift will be the value of the gift. So for the lifetime gifts, specifically CLT, we take 20% on 100% of the gift. That fraction is changed to 25% when the donor pays the tax, since the value of the gift is 80% of the gift and 20% is the relevant tax. I hope you understood the point here. And one more point I need to add here is the value of the gift is fixed at the time of gift. Is it so? Any participant? Okay. Uh, Good, very good. Why is that? There is a tax planning point related to it. The point is that the value is fixed. Why? Specifically, the value of those gift is fixed that is going to appreciate in future. We fix it so that if the occasion of charge arises on the death, there is lesser tax involved in that scenario. I hope you understood the point. Okay. Once again, it is important to remember that if the command word in the requirement is to calculate, if it says calculate, then you do calculate. If it says explain, then you do explain. If it says calculate and explain, you do the calculation and you do the explanations. Okay? But considering it is only of 3 marks, there is no point of explaining. There is no point of explaining. We will just be moving with the command word, that is calculate. Candidates should not be writing huge amounts in their answer. Brought forward text, you can knowledge on how to calculate the inheritance liability was needed here, because utilization of nil rate band is the key. Can anyone please specify how to utilize nil rate band in the case of PET and CLT? Does a PET utilize the nil rate band? Okay, this is the planning point, Ravi. But I want to ask if a PET consumes nil rate band or not on the first occasion of charge, that is lifetime tax on the lifetime transfers. Sorry, Ravi, I fear you are not right in this case. Let me explain you. For a PET, okay, let me take you to this window. There are 3 occasions of charges of charge in IHT. Number 1 is lifetime tax on lifetime transfers. Number 2 is death tax on lifetime transfers. And number 3 is death tax on state at death. In this occasion of charge, we ignore PETs. We simply ignore PETs. CLTs are applicable here. In second occasion of charge, PET and CLT both are involved, and this is specific to the state at death. Okay, Ravi, I hope you are clear. Okay. Now I am enjoying it since I feel like I'm adding in the knowledge of you people, and this is the case that is actually required from these kind of sessions. Okay. So some candidates appear to be unfamiliar with how to work the amount of the nil rate band available to offset against a lifetime gift and the concept of reducing this by chargeable lifetime transfer in 7 years in the 7 years before the one which liability was being calculated. So this is something that we have gone through in TX examination. Let me take you back to these rules, since I believe that this is very much important to explain. There are three rules that are very critical in IHD. Number one is use of nil rate band. Number two is grossing up of CLT. And number three is 7 years cumulation period. These areas you pick up from TX examinations, that is your F6 examination. Use of nil rate band, this is done through this. You have to understand that there are three occasions of charge, and you have to specify which gift is going to utilize a nil rate band and which is not going to utilize. CLT means chargeable lifetime transfers Kamran. When a gift is made to a trust, when a gift is made to an individual, it is called a PET, that is potentially exempt transfer, and CLT is a chargeable lifetime transfer. It is made to a trust. What type of trust we have got? One is an IIP trust, that is an interest in possession trust, and the other is a discretionary trust. Can anyone tell me what is a discretionary trust and what is an interest in possession trust? Ravi, I am vouching on you. Interest in possession trust. Okay, no worries. And interest in possession trust. Okay, let me explain. In trust, we have three parties. Number one is the trustee, who is looking after the trust. Number two is the beneficiary, for whose benefit the trust is made. And number three is the settler, the person creating the trust. If the trustee has the right to alter, to increase, to decrease the trust property, the trust is called discretionary trust. Since he has a discretion to input his own intellectual, since he can use his own intellectual to maneuver the investments and gain the returns, this is called a discretionary trust, where you can exercise your discretion, you being a trustee. And an IIP trust, interest in possession, it means that it is just in your possession. You are not supposed to alter the investments, you are not supposed to do anything with that. You have just the right to guard it as a trustee. You cannot use your own intellectual, or you can use your own decision making to alter the investments. I hope you people got that. This is very important because we can be asked such kind of questions for explaining an IIP trust or a discretionary trust or something like that. So these are the petty points that you should be giving attention to while preparing for the examination. Okay, so I was telling you about the use of nil rate band, crossing above a CLT. Both of these have been discussed, and third one is the 7-year cumulation period. The mistake we commit in the 7-year cumulation period, we say that whenever a gift is made, it has a potential to get exempt. That exemption is dependent upon the period of living after making the gift. If you live for more than 7 years, it is exempt, and if you die within 7 years, it is not exempt. Is it the case? Okay. PET was initially ignored. You die within 7 years, PET becomes chargeable. Then PET will be using the nil rate band, and it has become chargeable. Secondly, when it's the case of CLT, if you die within 7 years, it will become chargeable, and if you die for more than 7 years, it is simply exempt. But the very important point here is the tax paid on CLT once is never refundable. the tax paid on CLT during the lifetime in this first occasion of charge, that is lifetime tax on lifetime transfers, the tax paid on CLT here is never ever refundable. No tax credit given for this. If a CLT becomes exempt, the tax paid during lifetime is totally ignored. You cannot get any refund for that. Now, a, a gift that was chargeable, but now it is exempt, and exemption is dependent upon the date of death. A gift that was chargeable, but now it is exempt based upon the date of death. It has previously consumed some nil rate band. Since it is being exempt, now it is going to leave that nil rate band that it previously consumed. But the question here is, if a gift utilized 50,000 of nil rate band is now exempt, will leave 50,000? No. The answer is will not leave 50,000 in total. But what we will do is we will be putting this narration nil rate band available minus gross chargeable transfers in previous 7 years. So when we will do this, we will be taking the impact of the nil rate band being vacant while considering all chargeable transfers in the previous 7 years. So a gift that is no more chargeable as per the date of death and for state of death, but will be chargeable for a gift that is coming within the 7 years of the previous gift. Okay. Part B. Okay, the mistake here made by the student was they were not able to display. Okay, yes, Ravi. You're welcome for the question. Okay, so the students who were not able to display were not up to the mark for the calculation of the nil rate band, were not being able to identify the 7-year cumulation period correctly, and were not able. Okay, so the nil rate band that is used in a CLT, if it is more than 7 years, that the balance can be added back to the nil rate band at death. Okay, Ravi, this is this way, but I will prepare a question, because writing it here it takes a little time. I will prepare a question relating to IHT and specifically to this area in which I have solved, so you will be in a position to understand it nicely if you allow me to do it in the coming session. I hope you allow me. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I will be displaying it for the gifts and for the state of death, and then it will be a crystal clear concept for you, hopefully. Okay, so part B, worth 7 marks. This part of the question involved comparing two potential gifts which Fiona was planning to make to her son. Both were houses, one of which was located overseas and the other one was located in the UK. The requirement involved consideration of both CGT and IHT consequences and each of these gifts and the consideration of the timing before or after becoming UK resident. UK residency is a very critical area. We need to focus on understanding the UK ties. We need to know when remittance bases are applied and when remittance bases are not applied, and what are the limits of pounds accompanying that. If we are not able to verse it, it will be very much difficult for us to identify it in a scenario of a question and display the better results. This requirement involved, okay. Many candidates address some parts of the requirement but fail to cover all the aspects. For example, by only dealing with one of the properties and one of the taxes and not considering the timing of the gift. Okay, consider when we have income tax and when we have IHT and CGT moving hand by hand, it is a very tricky part where we need to know the interaction of both IHT and CGT. The examiner is watching it very keenly that were the students able to show the right interaction. Here it is mentioned by the examiner that some of the students were able to perform well, but some of the students failed to cover all aspects. Here it is written, failed to cover all aspects. For example, only dealing either by one property or either dealing with only one tax, not considering the time of gift, etc. When approaching this type of requirement in the absence of any other specific instruction as how to answer is to be presented, it may be helpful to think about using a tabular format. This would ensure that all the parts of the requirement adequately dealt with. On this occasion, this could have been in the following lines. This is the way that answer can be constructed. You can see, give before becoming UK resident, we have CGT and we have IHT. We have a UK property and we have an overseas property. The question says you have two properties. Number one is the UK property, number two is the overseas property. Both have been written here. No impact is going to be missed out on that. The CGT impact has been taken, the IHT impact has been taken. And the gift before becoming UK resident, this is number one, and this is number two, gift becoming after UK resident. So there is no space left where we could actually miss out on any information that we wanted to provide but we could not provide due to the exam pressure or maybe missing out on any requirement. Making such kind of tables, they can save you time and they can always be very handy in presentation to the examiner. Okay, not more than 10 minutes in this session. We will be concluding it at 10:15. So I would request you to please bear with me for some more time because the advices here from the examiner are very critical for passing the examination. The question also requested the advice on which of the two houses Fiona should gift her son and optimum timing of the gift. This therefore meant a conclusion needed to be drawn based on previously provided analysis. If the candidates were asked advice, there are specific marks allocated to this. So it is essential to ensure the relevant conclusion recommendation is made in order to earn the available credit. The point I am emphasizing again and again is dissect the requirement. The requirement clearly says, okay, give us a conclusion, give us a recommendation. If you fail to provide the recommendation for a specific answer in a specific question, you are actually failing to address the requirement. And the purpose of the question is not being fulfilled. So please understand the requirement, plan your answer, and conclude it with the right attitude and revisit what you have written so that if there is any mistake, you can correct it timely. Part C was worth 10 marks. There were two sub-parts of this requirement. The first asked for an explanation of why Fiona would be eligible for remittance basis and whether she should subject to remittance based charge or not. The remittance basis is available where an individual is UK resident but not UK domiciled. Is it so, Ravi? If a person is UK domiciled, then remittance bases are not available. You have to be UK resident but not UK domiciled. Fiona's status for the tax year was that of resident and deemed domiciled. She was not UK domiciled. In this case, the remittance basis is only available if being on deemed domicile. Remittance basis is only available if unremitted overseas income and gains in any tax year is within the prescribed £2,000 limit. In this situation, if you go through the question, there is no remittance charge. Some candidates appear to know the rule, but they were unclear on the amount of unremitted overseas income. See, if we have this limit of 2000, and there are certain incomes that are exceeding 2000 and that are not being remitted to UK, there is no point of its application. Like if you could see few further, I've written the question specifically stated that her overseas bank interest income of 1200 of 1200 would not be remitted to the UK, whereas that from her overseas rental properties would be. So the interest income of 1200 is not, the other would be, which is less than 2000, within an amount of overseas unlimited income of less than 2000, the remittance basis automatically applies to FONA for the relevant tax year. So there can be chances where you are given with different incomes, one is not being remitted, the other being remitted and falling within the limit, and still the remittance basis can be applied. I hope you are clear. The second subpart of this requirement asks the calculation of the FIONA income tax liability for the tax year 22-23. It's the tax liability, it's not the tax payable. Again, doing an extra step, doing an extra effort will not yield you any marks. It is worth emphasizing here once again that if asked for a calculation, there is no need to spend time providing detailed explanations to the relevant numbers. If you are directed to calculate, please calculate. If you're directed to explain, please explain. But when you are directed to calculate, do not provide lengthy explanations. They are not going to yield any marks. As long as they are clearly labeled and brief explanations to workings are given, the focus should be on doing the calculations themselves in order to earn the marks. The marks would be coming your way if you are doing the workings properly and if you are labeling the workings properly. There is no need to answer to write overwhelming kind of explanations. They will not be yielding any marks. Many candidates were able to produce an income tax computation in response to this part of the question and showed an awareness of the fundamentals of double tax relief. Okay, how is double tax relief applying? Anyone? If I have Zubair, I have Samuel, I have Sateh, I have Shri. Any of you guys who could explain a little about double taxation relief? When we apply which country? Okay. Basically, double taxation relief is applied when an enterprise is operating in UK and some other foreign country. While utilizing the resources of some other foreign country, they will be paying taxes in that foreign country. And when the income is remitted back to the UK, there will be tax on UK as well. When the enterprise will see that they are being taxed in UK and in the foreign country, they will not be at all happy for this double taxation thing. They would be definitely looking for some relief that the foreign country is not going to give, because that relief is going to be given by the home country, that is the UK. So this calculation basically involved, this question basically involved the calculation of double tax relief. Those who were able to display that many candidates were able to produce an income tax computation in respect strictly in order to calculate UK tax suffered on double taxation relief is given on the lower of the UK tax suffered and the overseas tax suffered, and the calculation that is showing both the outcomes will be attracting more marks in comparison to the other one. See, a calculation of the income tax liability with the overseas income included should be performed, and this should then be compared with the calculation of the liability with the foreign income excluded. In one calculation you are adding it, in one calculation you are leaving the foreign income. Both the cases you will have the answers, you will be comparing them. The difference in these two tax liability represent the UK tax on the overseas income, which is then compared with the foreign tax suffered. This is demonstrated in the model answer. We will be doing these questions in tomorrow session, and we will be able to look how can we actually make use of such model answers. So I believe I am going to conclude the session for today on this note, and I have taken your input to explain capital allowances, basis period, and application of 7-year cumulation period for tomorrow. In the opening hour of our session, we will be dealing with the discursive part of capital allowances, the basis period, and the application of 7-year cumulation period. It will take around an hour or more than an hour, and in the rest of the time we will be doing the questions for these parts. That is going to help. That is going to help the candidates. Mm, Uh, Guys, I don't think so that I can share my WhatsApp number, but I can share my email. You people can email me the stuff you want to ask or share. Ravi, CIP, CSOP, EMIs, and say I have opted a question uh, from a WhatsApp group. Okay, Kamran. Can you see my email address? Okay, drop your inquiries on this. I will be asking the relevant person if we could make a WhatsApp group, and if we can do that, we will be. I will be happily sharing it with you and adding you people. Okay. And yes, Ravi, I was telling you that SIP, CSOP, EMIs, and say I have a question prepared for this. We will be doing it in the 4th class, hopefully. So I hope the session was fruitful. Any recommendations, any feedback points you want to share? The agenda for tomorrow is capital allowances, basis periods, application of 7-year cumulation period. Bilal, application of 7-year cumulation period in detail, capital allowances, basis period again in detail, plus their relevant questions and their tax planning points. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thank you for your presence and input.